Good morning. Welcome to our Wednesday midweek meditation for Lent. Malchus. He is the slave of the high priest Caiaphas that will be part of the arrest group that comes to arrest Jesus while he is in the garden. The first passage I'm going to read to you that has this story is going to be John chapter 18, verses 1 through 14. And then because of trying to understand a little bit more about Malchus, we will also read in Luke. So I'll start with John here because John is the only gospel that actually mentions his name. The other three gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, just say that it is the slave of the high priest. They do not name him as John does. So hear these words. After he said these things, Jesus went out with his disciples and crossed over to the other side of the Cedron Valley. He and his disciples entered a garden there. Judas, his betrayer, also knew the place because Jesus often gathered there with his disciples. Judas brought a company of soldiers and some guards from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They came there carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus knew everything that was to happen to him. So he went out and asked, "Who are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus, the Nazarene." He said to them, "I am." Judas, his betrayer, was standing with them. When he said, "I am," they shrank back and fell to the ground. He asked them again, "Who are you looking for?" They said, "Jesus, the Nazarene." Jesus answered, "I told you, I am. If you are looking for me, then let these people go." This was so that the word he had spoken might be fulfilled. "I didn't lose any one of those whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus told Peter, "Put your sword away. Am I not to drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the guards from the Jewish leaders took Jesus into custody. They bound him and led him first to Annas. He was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who advised the Jewish leaders that it was better for one person to die for the people. It's interesting that John's gospel is the one, at least around the stories of Jesus's death and the stories of Lazarus, gives name to people who are, their stories are mentioned in the other gospels, but John actually gives them a name. Malchus is the name of this servant or slave of Caiaphas, the high priest. This story, and that there was a slave of the high priest who had his ear sliced off due to either, here in John, it's the disciple Simon Peter who does it, but in the other gospels, again, it's just one that was in the crowd or another one of the disciples. They're not named specifically as it is here in John's gospel. But this character of Malchus is a fascinating and yet powerful one. It's so important, this act of slicing off the ear of one of the slaves of the high priest is so important that it is mentioned in all four gospels. So when all four of them tell the same or similar story, you know that it's extremely important, that it's circulated, that people knew and heard this story well for a reason, that there's a message quite behind it. And it's not until we actually read in Luke's gospel that Luke is the only one that even mentions Jesus putting the ear back on and healing Malchus. So I wanted to read a little bit of that as well, because that's part of it. It says that, so this is found in Luke chapter 22, verses 47 through 53. While Jesus was still speaking, a crowd appeared, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him. Jesus said to him, Judas, would you betray the human one with a kiss? When those around him recognized what was about to happen, they said, Lord, should we fight with our swords? One of them struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus responded, Stop, no more of this. He touched the slave's ear, and he healed him. I can't imagine how emotional and yet chaotic at the same time this was for Malchus. I mean, Mark or Luke's gospel is the only one that talks about, and it's literally just one sentence. It's verse 52 of chapter 22. It's 51. And it says that he touched the slave's ear and he healed him. He touched the slave's ear and he healed him. Just a brief sentence. The other three gospels don't say that part. They just move on in the story with the arrest and go on to everything else. But here in Luke, that's a very significant part of Malchus' story. That here he is, he's a slave or a servant of the high priest, just following orders, doing what he's told to do. And he goes to arrest this one called Jesus that people are talking about, that people are saying is needs to be arrested and needs to be crucified. Although those words don't quite show up yet. Caiaphas is one of the leaders in this movement who believes that Jesus is the one who should be taken down. Malchus probably, just listens to the orders that he's given, not sure. We don't know how much he knows about Jesus, whether he knows a lot or whether he's a follower of Jesus or not. We just know that he is a servant of the high priest. And he enters into this garden and is probably just on the scene, or maybe he's even the one of them that arrested Jesus. And one of the disciples, so whether it was Simon Peter, whether it was somebody in the crowd, we're not sure, depending on which story that you read through, which gospel that you read on, who exactly draws their sword out and slices off his ear. And so we have this visual, this picture of a servant of the high priest just probably holding his face in agonizing pain because his ear has been sliced off and trying to just do this job, not really fully understanding the moment. And here is this Jesus, the one who everyone is talking about, that he had come to arrest, who comes up to him. And as it says, right in Luke 22:51, Jesus touches the slave's ear and he heals him. He just touches his ear and heals him. I can imagine it's more than just the ear that was healed. Anytime Jesus touches you, whether it's a physical touch of the body or spiritual love and grace that is upon you because of Jesus' love, you're changed. There's no way that Malchus was the same person after that moment that he was before he entered in. Whether he was just there at the wrong time doing his job or whether he was a follower or not, none of that essentially matters in this story. What matters is this powerful moment in which Jesus touches Malchus to the point in which he is forever changed. He's one of those characters in scripture that we don't hear much about. This is the only time that he shows up, that we hear or we talk about him. We see him around the time of Lent and the time of the death of Christ in the arrest. But that's it. We don't know if after this he does all that he can to worship the true King. Or maybe he had this moment with Jesus and he went back to the way things were, but yet couldn't get it. I don't believe that he could have possibly experienced this moment with Jesus and went back to his order as a servant or a slave to the high priest. Maybe he kept his job because he may have a family that he needs to feed and to care for, And that's why he had the job to begin with. But his heart would have been changed. We oftentimes think of illness and God touching our lives as just physically healing a person. We might say, this person has cancer, or this person has an illness. God, please heal them. And most of the time we're referencing heal that disease, heal that cancer. But God works in more than just one way, and God is working in amazing ways to heal our whole well-being. That's why I think this story is remarkable, because I don't believe that Jesus just healed the ear of Malchus. I think that he healed his heart and his soul as well. Because once you encounter Jesus, once you even just taste one brief moment of his love, I believe that you can't help but to be changed by that. And that's how the church began to grow and to develop, was these early Christians, or these early followers of Christ, these disciples who will become apostles, who witnessed all of this, the death and then the resurrected Christ. They began to, they had a glimpse of Jesus. They had this bit of his love, and they couldn't help but to share that out into the world, to share it with one another, and to grow and to tell the story of Jesus, this wonderful truth and life. And it continued to emulate that. And people were changed because they too were able to be embraced and healed by the love of God. As I think of Malchus' story, I was reminded of a time in which I went and did a hospital visit with a church member. And I remember this because it was absolutely remarkable and yet challenging at the same time. But they had they'd been in the hospital for about a week. They finally figured out what was going on, and the doctor's conclusion was, yes, this lady, she was 85 years old, and they could do a surgery. Basically, what had happened was her whole bowels and stomach had erupted. They could do a surgery where they could go in and they could fix that, but it was risky. So the option was do the surgery and hope that it works and give her a few more years of life, or to choose not to do it, and she would not survive long. And the lady made the decision. She was completely cognitive at the time that this was all happening. She was alert and awake, and she made the decision. She said, you know what? I've lived 85 years. It doesn't sound like even if I have this surgery, I'll live much longer. So I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to choose to not live here any longer. And so I come in to the room to visit her. I didn't know that this was going on, and I walk into the room, and she's just laying there on the bed, and she just tells me all of this. She says, I could have chose to have this surgery, but why? Why have them do a surgery that there's no guarantee it's even going to work just for another few more years? I've lived a long life. And while she's telling me this story, she also says, with just tears, she says, but I'm scared. I know that I am not going to live much longer. I might not even live the week if I don't have this surgery, and I'm scared. And it was a beautiful moment in which we prayed, and I read scripture to her, and we talked about the afterlife and what it would be to be in the presence of God, that even in fear, there's going to be joy and a peace beyond understanding. And while I'm not sure if I fully was able to help comfort her grief and her worries, she thanked me and said that, she knows that she made the right decision, and she felt at peace with that decision. And she didn't live much longer. I believe it was at least 2 days and before she passed. But I think of that story when I think of Malchus, that yes, God does heal us physically, but no matter what thing God heals us from, he is always working beyond any of that. That God is working on our soul and our spirit, that once we even encounter Jesus, we can't help but be changed. And Malchus' story is a beautiful reminder of that. Jesus could have not healed his ear at all. He could be deaf or have just a place there with the ear missing. But of course, from this verse, we assume that that's what Jesus did. Jesus did place the ear and heal it. But that's not Malchus' story. Malchus' story is witnessing a love of God, a grace, a being healed from the inside out, a whole healing, because he got a glimpse to know who Jesus was. And that, for us, brothers and sisters of Christ, is a beautiful and yet horrific story of the cross. That in that moment where Jesus dies for us on the cross, where we catch a glimpse of Jesus's love and mercy, we also catch a glimpse of his struggle and his pain. And all of that is a reminder of humanity and what it means to be loved and cherished by a God who heals not only physical, but heals us from the inside out to make us beautifully whole. May the Lord go with you this day. May the Lord comfort you this week. And may you be reminded of what it means to even have a glimpse and a moment of Jesus' presence upon you. That's all it takes to be made whole. Amen.